Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're starting something new, Python. Python is a powerful, very popular, and easy to learn coding language. And instead of just learning syntax, we're going to be building a simple guessing game together. And on the screen here, you can see that we have a little chart, and we're going to be covering our beginner Python series with 6 videos. Starting off with a simple guessing game, we're going to be covering variables, conditionals, loops, input, output, as well as how to get started with Python. So if this is your first time using Python and you don't yet have it installed on your machine, I'd recommend heading on over to python.org, and any of the links that I'm talking about today are available in the description below. So you want to head on over to python.org, and there's lots of great documentation. And you'll want to head over to the Downloads tab here, and it should do a pretty good job of recognizing what operating system you're on. I'm running on Mac. If you're running on Windows, it should prompt you to download the most recent version, and there are the tabs on the left here. So we're going to go ahead and select to download Python. For me right now, it's 3.13.2, and it's going to go ahead and go into my downloads folder. From here, I'm going to open up the package. If you're on Windows, it might be in executable, and let's go ahead and install Python. Awesome, and we can see that Python has successfully been installed. Now, if you're on Mac, you can open up Terminal, or if you're on Windows, you can open up the command. And from here, we can check our version of Python by typing out Python 3. We can do -v or --version. Both of those should work, and we can see that we are indeed running on 3.13.2, which is the one we had just installed. And for the -v, you will need to make sure that it is a capital. Cool, now that we have Python installed, we need a development environment, or you can use your command or terminal, but I find working in a development environment to be a lot easier. And I recommend using Visual Studio Code. I think it's just something that's really easy. You should be able to just download it right away from the website. Again, it should be just available to your operating system. You'll want to press on the download for operating system or the download button on the top right. And depending on the operating system, you can choose to download the appropriate version, and you go through the steps to install that as well. Now, there are other options that you can use for Python. I just find Visual Studio Code to be the easiest. So let's go ahead and start coding. First, we're going to create a new file with the start here. You can also go to the top of the screen, File, New File, if that's easier for you and you don't have this welcome page. And from here, we can select a file type or enter a file name. Because we don't yet have the Python extension, we'll just need to add the .py file extension at the end of our file. So I'm going to call this one guessing game. Then I'm going to do .py. Let's go ahead and create that new file by hitting enter or return, and we'll save it in the appropriate place. I just have a folder on my desktop called Python for my Python projects. So at the bottom right of my screen here, you can see that we have a little prompt on Visual Studio Code. Do you want to install the recommended Python extension from Microsoft for the Python language? We should go ahead and install that. It should only take a few seconds. If you don't get the prompt, you can go to the left panel of the screen here where there's the extensions, and you can search for Python. It should be the one from Microsoft themselves. You can see it has 160 million downloads, no small amount. All right, first in our game, let's go ahead and generate a random number for our game. And because we're going to be working with random, we first at the top of our file need to import the random feature. So we use the import keyword and then whatever we're adding. So in this case, random. Next, we're going to create a number variable. And this is going to be how we decide every time that the program runs what the random number the user has to guess is. So we're going to give it a name. In this case, I said number. Then we're going to use the equals operator in order to assign it a value. And now for the value, we're going to say random dot rand for random, and then int, so rand int. And this is allowing us to grab a random integer. Integers are whole numbers, so anything that doesn't have a decimal value. Then we're going to go ahead and add some brackets. And you can even see here that it's suggesting that we kind of follow the formula above, where we're going to be returning a random integer in range, including both endpoints. So what we can do is within these brackets, we can pass through the argument. So what are those random numbers or that random range going to be? So for mine, I'm going to do 1, comma, space 10. And this is going to assign a random number, including, this is going to assign a random number from 1 to 10, also including 1 and 10. Next, let's get some input from the player. So we're going to create a guess, again, starting with the variable name, then using the equal sign. And here we're going to be asking for input. So we're going to be using that keyword, and we're going to be adding our brackets again. So what is the input or the kind of message for the user? So we're going to be using a string value for this. Strings hold information that's used in text. I like to remember this by when we're reading books. When a character is saying something, it has the quotation marks. So that's how we can convey strings or text to the user or to the program. So we're going to add those quotation marks, and you can see on my end it already added the start and end. And this is where we can add our message. So we're going to say guess a number between 1 and 10. That's awesome, but we do have a quick problem. Our number is currently an integer, which is a number, and our guess is currently a string. So the way around this is before our input here, we're going to go ahead and add the keyword of int, and then we're going to wrap our input in the brackets. So now with this int keyword, this is going to convert that text into an integer so we can compare those two values to see if the user got the answer correctly or incorrectly. Now let's go ahead and add some game logic to our code. This is going to ensure that the player will keep guessing until they find the correct number. So we're going to go ahead and attract the amount of attempts that the user has done. And we're going to have this start off as the number 0, and we don't need to declare that this is an integer. Since we're declaring it as a whole number, it already kind of knows what to do. Next, we're going to use a while statement, and this is going to track a condition while something is met. So in this case, while true, I want something to happen. Just note that while true loops run indefinitely until they are broken by a break. So we'll be sure to include that. Next, we're going to add a colon after the true here. It might be a little bit hard to see. And this is where we're going to handle the logic that's going to run while the condition is true. So we're going to go ahead and use our guess. And if we actually want to save some time here, we can copy and paste the one that we created earlier. And then on the next line, we're going to go ahead and add 1 to our attempts. And the short form way to do this is to say attempts plus equals 1. So this is just going to increment our attempts number by 1 every single time that the user guesses. Next, we're going to be using an if statement. If statements work on conditions. So we're going to say if the guess equals the number, right? So if I guess the exact random number that is picked, I'm going to add a colon. I want the preceding code to happen. So if the user is correct, I'm going to go ahead and print a message to the console, and I'm going to use f, lowercase f, and then I'm going to go and add my string, and I'm going to say congrats, you've guessed correctly in, and then we can actually display the amount of attempts that the user has taken, and we can pass along this information into the string by using the brace here. It kind of looks like a little squiggly bracket. And to pass that number in, we're just going to reference the attempts variable we've created above. So when the user gets the number correctly, they're going to know in how many tries. So after the brace, we can actually continue our string and say tries. Then we're going to use our break keyword. Remember, when we have a while true statement, we need to ensure that there's a way for us to kind of break out of it, or it's going to repeat forever and cause some issues. Okay, but what if we didn't get the number on the first guess? I mean, that's pretty hard to do, right? We can't see the future. So we can actually use what's called an else if statement. And this is kind of short formed by using elif. So else if the guess is less than the actual number, we can add our colon again, and we can print to the user that it is too low and try again. And we can then add a final else condition by typing out the else keyword, add our colon once again. We'll print that the number is too high, try again. So we're able to use conditionals to first check if the guess is correct. And if that's the case, we let them know, congrats, and we break. We get out of that while true statement. If the user guesses something that is lower than the actual number, we give them a hint saying that it's too low and to try again. And then we use the final else to basically say, okay, if the first condition isn't true and the second condition isn't true, this is my final condition. The number must be too high. Please try again. If you really want to, you can create another else if before the final else. And if the user guesses something that's greater than 10 or perhaps something that's lower than 0, you can even print a customized message. Hey, this number is incorrect. Make sure that you're guessing within the range. You can get really, really specific with your conditionals. But for our first little program, this should be good to go. Okay, cool. We can go ahead and get rid of our previous logic on line 5. And something I want to show you is you can actually just comment off code by adding a hashtag or shift 3 on your keyboard. Since we're already handling this logic while in the while true, we can go ahead and get rid of it. Now to run our program, let's go ahead and run our Python file. You should be able to do this by pressing the arrow in the top right or by going to the Run tab up here. And you can do the run without debugging, but I find it's just easier to press the arrow. So we have our console or our terminal in the very bottom. It says guess a number between 1 and 10. I'm going to go ahead and guess the number 10 and hit return. It says too high, try again. Let's try 8. Too low. Well, we know that that number should now be the number 9. Get a little message that says, congrats, you've guessed correctly in 3 tries. Wonderful. Now, in order to play our game again, we'll have to run the program one more time. Let's go ahead and guess the number 5 this time. Too low, try again. I'm gonna try 7. Ooh, look at that. I got it in 2 tries, that attempt. So you can see how we are able to create this logic, and let's just quickly go through it one more time. We first started off by importing random, which allows us to pick random variables out of a certain range. We then assigned a number, and from this number we said, okay, every time I run this program, I want you to pick a random integer from 1 to 10 inclusive. We're also setting our attempts to be 0, and this is very important that we do this because every time we run our program, it's going to be like a clean slate. Even though the first time I took 3 attempts, the second time you notice it said 2 attempts, not 5, because we reset this back to 0. We're then using our while true to grab the guess input from the user, and every time we attempt to get the number right, we're incrementing that attempt number by 1. We then use the conditionals in the form of if, else if, and else to handle user guesses and provide feedback based on the number and their guess. So, in just a few lines of Python, we've learned about variables, random numbers, user input, loops, and conditionals, all critical skills in coding. Games like this build the foundation you'll use in bigger, real-world applications. Great job today. Next video, we'll make a simple calculator app to dive deeper into Python. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments or suggestions below. Thank you so much for watching. And if you're new to my channel, I actually usually cover Swift and iOS development on Xcode on Macs. So if that's something that interests you, please feel free to check out my other videos. Otherwise, dream big, code bigger, and have an amazing day.